And then take me to artifacts that you've not shown that kind of highlight one of the principles or standards that you think you've represented very well, and then one that was a little bit more of a challenge, harder to do, and how you tried to negotiate that one, please.
I think the one that I'm actually the proudest of, because it kind of developed over time, was Principle 8 with assessments. And the reason I talk about this is specifically twofold. One, I managed to incorporate the traditional tests. There are a lot of assessments, the mock trial, the essays, the lobbying activities, these kind of other performance types based activities that I think really allowed students to do something a little bit different than sit down and respond to multiple choice questions, which they struggled with. And something I have to decide, is it my test taking or is it something else going on, or test creation. But the other reason is my last unit, I was very intentional of differentiation. I did this in two ways. Inspired by Jenny's CT, I developed a pre-assessment. I ended up giving the pre-assessment to every single student as a kind of benchmark for the post-assessment. And those students who passed the pre-assessment would be able to engage in alternative activities. So this is my pre-assessment test. I gave them notes. They could study the notes. Everything they really needed to know for the test was on some worksheets I had already given them. It was multiple choice, 27 multiple choice, and then 2 short answers. Very basic. I had 2 students who passed. My passing requirement was 90% or higher. I kept it very high because I wanted them to know the material before they do some alternative assessments. And then I gave those 2 students the chance to participate in alternative assessments. And they both took the opportunity. Here's my working conditions for the alternative activities. They need to stay on task. They need to keep in contact with me about what they're doing. They need to be quiet. They can't brag about this. And they both did great. And then I gave them options. I got 5 different concepts that they could choose from. They picked 2 concepts. And then there were 6 different creative projects that they could do. There's create a game, illustrate a children's book, demonstrate something, create a podcast, write something, or create your own idea. One young lady did a poster display and a writing thing, a sort of essay talking about, she talked about world economies and kind of connecting what we know about world economies. And then the other young lady did 2 kids' books. Unfortunately, I don't have the scan yet. One was on scarcity and opportunity cost, called The Candy Store, about a kid who goes to a candy store, wants something but it's sold out. And she talks about opportunity cost because she couldn't decide between one or another. And then she did one on the production cycle, the factors of production, which I think was based, at least in part, on a raft assignment that I had students do. So I think that's the one I'm most proud of.
It's a standard that you found challenging to negotiate, or principle?
Sorry, somebody created a principle for me. I think, oddly enough, principle number 1 about tools of inquiry, central concepts, was one I wrote a lot about, but I struggled with just because of my own diverse background. And I was trying to keep it very focused upon my concept and abilities when it came to the social studies. There's a lot of overlap between humanities and social studies, but there's also some disconnects. And so I think I kind of struggled, especially trying to pull examples from my past careers, student careers.
What's the next Ithaca?
The next Ithaca? Full-time teaching.
5 years from now, are you still in the classroom?
Yes. And I'm working on or completing my national board certification.
You're a very transparent teacher in that you have a very defined digital footprint and identity, right? Which you and I both know can be pretty difficult sometimes to balance.
Yes.
To figure out how much you reveal, how much you don't reveal, what you choose to, how you present yourself. Tell me what you've learned from that that will help inform the digital footprints of your students next year, because I would anticipate that your students have digital footprints given the realities of how this is infusing your teaching.
Well, I talk about this when I talk about technology, Principle 6. I talk about how part of what I want to do with technology is not only using them as tools to teach, but also showing them responsible ways to interact with the world around them. Specifically, how do you responsibly interact with people you don't know via Facebook or something like that. And that's why I think a tool like Edmodo, which I dubbed Facebook Lite, is one of those great ways of doing that, where they can see how a responsible way of interacting with their classmates occurs in kind of a contained environment that can be monitored, and I can do some monitoring and modeling. So that, I mean, that's just one example.
So is your plan to keep things in that kind of container-like space, or do you go more public?
No, it's multimodal. It's touching on everything, but that's kind of like, I think that's going to be the core, is creating an environment that's contained where they can be safe and they can do these things, but then do some activities like doing a Twitter activity where we tweet the U.S. Constitution, which I've done before, and being a little bit more open about it rather than me simply saying, okay, you come up here, type it into my Twitter account, and post it all up here, but also allowing them to kind of start interacting a little bit more with that.
One follow-up and then I'll be quiet.
Okay.
You get one job offer. One. It's brief. I have to be careful when I say this, it's brief. And that one job offer is in a pretty rural school. You'll have one computer in your classroom. It's a penny and one. It's got a little hamster running on the wheel in it. Right? There's one computer lab, but that computer lab is owned by the business department. So the odds of you getting in there, unless you bake really good brownies or wash people's cars for them, not really high. How do you teach your kids digital literacy skills in that environment?
Well, you focus on transference, talking about developing them with the skills that they use on an everyday setting. And when possible, when the business people will be kind enough to let me use a computer lab, drawing them in. Or, simply, well, the other way, I think, if I was ever in that situation, I would push for additional funding elsewhere. I would go out and do that on my own. But I think the main thing is talking about transfers.
John, are you still on?
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Well, I enjoyed watching it. Thanks. I was wondering about your notion of digital citizenship and whether or not you see. It sounds like you're a Twitter user.
Yep.
And you've used it in class. So I was just wondering how you see tools like Twitter in with regard to your ideas about digital citizenship.
I guess I would have to say I see it twofold. Number one, the connection to digital literacy, developing the ability to communicate using a digital technology, a Web 2.0 technology. So at least familiarity with the 140 character structure, abbreviations, just some of the basic stuff. But then the second step, of course, is connecting to the larger network. Finding people to connect with and starting to engage in that, and then responding. Because I think it's important to talk about the responsibilities, not just kind of the rights that you have as a digital citizen. So kind of responsibility as being part of a network to engage in conversation, not be a passive recipient of information.
So you would use that in your teaching. But do you have an example? Have you done that?
I have not done. Let me think. Actually, I have not done anything outside of a structured, contained environment other than by tweeting U.S. Constitution, but that's connected to my own tweets, not to something engaging.
Here, I'll look forward to hearing more about it as you continue.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you.